for coming, especially tonight. This is a really cool room of people, and it's an awesome mix. I don't know most of you, which is actually really exciting. One of the many reasons I'm here is because I just really want to know how many artists are living and working in Philadelphia, and we don't know that. And Julie is going to help us understand why it's so hard to get that kind of information. But I have a feeling it's a remarkable amount of artists, and we should feel like we can collect and organize in some way. So again, I'm Debbie Shapiro, for the many of you I don't know, and alongside Amy Smith and Jenny Layden and John Frisbee, we are 4 artist administrators who had coffee 2 weeks ago. And the reason we had coffee 2 weeks ago is because we were overhearing and participating in so many little conversations happening all over the place, and they started to grow in volume really quickly. Not partially because of a Friends Arts blog that had been posted. That was more the timing. The issues aren't new and the conversations aren't new. But this event is a bit about getting bigger and maybe starting a formal process that could potentially be new. So thank you. And also, to be clear, this is not a panel discussion. This is a conversation where we're all going to talk as much as we can. However, we've gotten together to structure it so that it makes sense and we're focused. And best case scenario is that we walk out of here with some common understanding of the way we talk about our issues and some ideas about what we can do next. So that's what we're going to work on today. There's no sponsor for this event. This is individuals. We volunteered our time. We donated some supplies and money. Drexel donated the space. Thank you, Drexel, so much. And Julie is someone we invited to help us. So she's also donating her time and energy. And I'm going to introduce her in just a minute. I just want to be clear about some basic organizing of this evening. We came up with this index card idea, and we came up with 2 questions that we hope will spark all of the kinds of issues and questions that we could cover tonight. So the idea is that when you're ready and move to, you can answer those questions. John, or maybe just Jenny. Jenny, who's not here yet, but she's going to show up any minute. She just ran out, all black. Jenny's going to collect them as we go. So it's kind of this function of live polling the room and making sure that as we're driving this conversation, we're talking about what you all are here to talk about. So that's the purpose of those. And at the same time, we've also come up with an agenda. So the cards are going to work into an agenda, and we're going to talk more about that and the rules of the room with Julie. I want to introduce Julie. The reason that we invited her is because her wealth of experience and her dedication to arts in Philadelphia. She, at one point, was a dancer artist here. She's been a force in arts advocacy for the entire sector, and now she's the director of the Arts Admin program, master's degree program here. She has a really unique ability to synthesize complex issues into accessible and actionable language. I really feel that way. Thank you. No pressure, but she's going to present and lead some ideas to us that we're going to all take part in today. So thank you so much for being here. And let's talk about the agenda, how we're going to structure it.
All right. So this is essentially a structured improvisation, right? Literally, the 5 of us have no idea what is going to happen, what is going to be said. We have no idea where we really want this to go. We have no preconceived, like, let's drive everyone over this way. That is what you all will do. And we will try our best to keep control of that and to help people see some signposts along the way. And then at the end of the night, we'll figure out what happens next, because we haven't decided what that is in advance either. Oh yes, so I'll get to it. I'll definitely include it. So basically, this improvisation is going to occur in 3 phases. The first one is about the current situation from your perspective. And that's what we asked you about on the first half, the front side of that index card, right? Because we know that everybody in this room, artist or not, right, faces concerns about financial stability, security, vulnerability. And we also know that money represents different aspects of your life and your career as an artist, right? So we're asking you guys to think about what are the barriers that you're facing now that piqued your interest in coming to this particular conversation, in being in a community, in a group of artists to have this discussion. What is it that you see in your own situation or in the situations of other people that you know that led you here, so that we can surface, what are some commonalities and differences among what people are experiencing out in the field. The other thing that we really want you to think about is, if you are experiencing, like most of us are, a lack of what you might call adequate or sustainable financial resources, what does that actually represent to you in your life as an artist? And that is where this little sheet comes in handy. It's from a piece of research that was conducted in 2004 by the Urban Institute. And the author of the study is a woman named Maria Rosario Jackson. She's done a great job throughout her career of really working on behalf of individual artists and helping the rest of us try to understand what's going on for them. And after a few years of study, she basically came up with a 6-part sort of support system, if you will, where she had identified through a national review of a lot of different communities and hundreds of artists, what are the characteristics of a community where an artist feels supported or not, right? And she basically found that whether it was about money, whether it was about other kinds of resources, everything fell into these sort of 6 buckets. The first one is about validation, right? Do you feel validated for the work that you do? The second one is about market and demand, right? Do you feel that there's an adequate market or an adequate demand for the type of work that you do? And do you think that the market is developing in a way that supports your work or not? Then there's the question of material support, right? Do you have access to the things that you need to be able to create, to be able to actually literally produce your work? There's the idea of training and professional development, right? Which might be a moment in time where, oh, I need this one skill, I need to learn it, or it might be a question about sort of lifelong education and development. You can view that however you wish. There's a question of communities and networks, right? Do you feel like you're in a community of artists, that you have access to a community of artists? And do you feel like you have a network beyond that, that supports your work as an artist? And then finally, there's the category of information. What do you know? What do you wish you knew? What do you find frustrating that we all don't know about the arts and the arts community? Debbie has one of those, right? What's your frustration about information?
Well, I think it's, again, I can't believe that we don't know how many of us there are right here in the city. And it seems to be, based on some research we did before this, is that it's really hard to decide how you're going to measure what an artist is and how to define what an artist is. And that's the biggest barrier to understanding how many there are.
Right. So we'll talk a bit more about that as the night goes on. But that's what we're really looking for in this first, laughably, 20 minutes, right? Is to surface some of those things, to see if we can get a sense of, is there a particular place where, where there's a real pressure point for a lot of people, or is it, sort of all over the map? And either situation is fine. Not really fine, but fine. And if fine for our purposes this evening, I'll say that. If this rubric is helpful to you in thinking about that, great, use it. If it's not, don't. This is totally, sort of a question for you about what do you need to consider your career and your life work to be sustainable. What is missing from that picture for you right now? So that's what we're trying to surface here. Then, on the flip side of the card, we asked you if you could think of a grassroots way for this community to help make that happen. Right? Whatever it is that you feel that you need to create greater sustainability, what can the rest of us do to help in that regard?
And those could be little seeds of ideas that are pretty wild and need a lot more baking, but that's the part that I'm really excited about, and that's the conversation I want to get us to and spend most time on.
Extra cards.
Extra cards, and Jenny
so,
right there.
So the way that these cards will work is, right, a lot of you grabbed one on the way in, which is awesome. Anytime that you have something on that card and you want to get rid of it so that it comes to the front for discussion or observation, by all means hold up your card, or, and poor Jenny will run around and grab your card or get you cards. The other thing that you can do is raise your hand and let us know that you want to speak, right? Because that will work well too. So that's the first part. The second part, we'll ask for your ideas. Then we're going to take a break because we think we'll all need a break at that point, or at least Debbie and I will. And then we will come back and start to talk about anything that surfaces out of all of this discussion that we might collectively or in subsets or individually be able to move forward, and how we might think about doing that together. So that's the agenda. We have a basic set of rules, which is we'd like for you to stand if you're speaking. So that everyone can actually see who's speaking, which can be a little tough to do in this room, and so that, we have a point of control there. We'd like for you to respect everyone else in the room and those who are not in the room tonight. We fully anticipate that some of these conversations might be difficult. Some of these things might be tough to surface. So please do your best there. And then we are also asking you to identify yourself. You can choose to do that however you wish. We're not going to put any kind of stricture on that. John, can I make you say your own quote? Because I love it. This quote that none of you can read is by John Frisbee, and it's awesome. So I'm going to make him say it.
Yeah, and I thought a sort of nebulous ground rule would be that we, have a certain amount of focus to this discussion. So the quote which Julie has kindly attributed to me is, "We're not going to have a pissing contest about which discipline is worse off, and we're not going to solve the American economy." We're just trying to kind of speak to a very small sector of it.
And the reason John didn't stand is because he's generously taking minutes. But the rest of you will stand when you talk. But I'm just going to interject and let you know that we are taking notes. We have a video going too. So this is getting documented, obviously to reference, but also because this is for a much larger group of people than are actually going to make it tonight. So we're going to be sharing this widely and maybe referring it to come up with what's next as well. So just keep that in mind. That's another reason it's pretty important to make it clear that you have something to say, so you can stand and you'll be the only one talking at that time.
All right. So a few more things for you to know before we actually dive in and ask you to talk to us. Please talk to us. One is that, as Debbie mentioned, it's hard to count the number of artists. There's two major reasons for that are pretty well established out in the field. One is that the definition of what constitutes an artist can be very difficult to gain consensus around. There are a lot of different definitions out there. So part of this process may be that we all try to do that. Part of it may not be that we try to do that. But just know that that's the first barrier to actually counting how many artists there are, is deciding what an artist is on a definition that everyone generally agrees on. And then there's the question of data sources, right? So once you've decided how to describe this set of people, how do you actually count them? And most research falls into sort of three different areas. Someone will go to a list of funders or a membership association and say, well, who have you funded? There's my list of artists, right? And they'll do their research following that trail. Someone else will say, let me look up tax forms. If all of these guys have filed a Schedule C, I'm going to go pull and see who's done that, and I can count that way, right? And all of these are imprecise, right? Because not everyone receives a grant who is an artist, and not every artist may file that particular tax form for one reason or another. And then the last general way that folks go about this is, what's called a census, right, or an actual head count. And that's also an imprecise science, right? How do you know that you have accounted for every single person who fits in this definition? It's a very tough thing to do. So that's why it's hard to actually count numbers. That said, there are some people who have tried valiantly. And you'll find on this website, which is Philly Artists Summit 2S's.org, you'll find some of that research there, and you'll find a lot of other resources that helped us get ready for tonight's conversation there too. So the second thing I want to tell you is that you really do have it tough. You are not imagining this, right? Artists make less money and pay more of their own healthcare costs relative to most other professions. That is in fact true. You are not imagining it. There are a lot of well-documented reasons for this. Some of them are about economic theory, which I will not bore you with this evening. And some of them are about the notion that we're the kind of people who are always going to do the work for less or for free because we are naturally compelled to do it, right? So there's everything in that range there. The next thing to know, however, is that none of you are alone in this challenge, right? Everyone in here comes here through a different creative process, through a different avenue of deciding that you wanted to be here in this room tonight. But what we all have in common is that we actually do care about this issue, right? I would venture that the other thing that we all have in common is that we're all really smart, thoughtful people. So please bring that to bear in these discussions. I know that Lois, where's Lois? Somewhere back there, Lois knows what's happening in a lot of other cities because she's just gotten back from a national conference, so I'll ask you if you don't mind surfacing that later tonight. And that this conversation is not just happening in this room tonight, but is happening around the city in a lot of different ways. This one happened to start from a conversation in the coffee shop. I just got back from a meeting of the Mayor's Cultural Advisory Council where this same question was raised an hour and a half ago. So, it's a conversation that's on a lot of people's minds. So know that you're not the only ones thinking about it, and you're not the only ones concerned about it. And the last thing I'll say is that really complex issues, right, are at the heart of this discussion. And I think that's kind of what John's quote alludes to there. And there's another one up here that I'll read for you in a minute. So we have 2 hours. Now we have a lot less than 2 hours. We're not gonna accomplish every possible solution to this puzzle in these 2 hours. What we all wanted to do was get started and to see where the traction is and to see how we might all think about moving forward in some way together. Because these are issues that really matter and about which something can be done. So we're going to try and work on that. So the last thing I'll read you is a quote from a project that inspired all of us when we found it over the weekend. It's a group of artists in Brooklyn who got together and had a similar series of conversations about a year ago. They're called the Brooklyn Commune. You can read their project report on the phillyartistsummit.org website. You can link to it through there. It's a fascinating report about a year's worth of research that they did on artists in Brooklyn. But here's their quote. If economics, specifically the economics that govern cultural production within the arts ecosystem, can be seen not as a discrete, impenetrable system, but rather as a creative design problem to be solved collectively, then artists will come together to solve it. We found all of that very inspirational, and I hope that you all do too. So with that said, I'll kick it back to Debbie.
Yeah, thank you. And so the folks behind Brooklyn Commune are it's Andy Horowitz from CultureBot, along with, I can't remember, but 2 individuals that started in a similar way that we did. And one, probably like informal coffee shop conversation led to one public gathering, which led to a weekend project, which led to something of a strategic plan with working groups, and it was all community-led and artist-led, and it was pretty fascinating. And what they published came out this year, so it's pretty fresh. So that was a lot of what we were inspired by. And again, to come back to the timing of what this was something that got invigorated by one article, and now there's more press. A lot of press actually came out today that none of us had to do with, but more public markings of conversations that need to be had. So actually Josh McIlvaine is here. I was going to ask him if you wouldn't mind talking about why he decided to interview Charlotte Ford at this moment.
Yeah, try to be easier for you.
Let's get more casual
Okay.
too. And
So, my name is Josh McIlvaine, and I'm a theater artist, but I'm also an editor, and I work for Fringe Arts, and I put together a guide, and I do their blog post. And I just want to ask, how many people read the Charlotte Ford post? Great, good reading. But to give a context to it, just to give you some context, to interview with the actor and theater creator Charlotte Ford, detailing how she made a living as a full-time artist for several years, and how she decided to go to grad school to bring another career because she found out being a full-time artist in Philadelphia was untenable in the long term. So the idea to detail the life of a successful Philadelphia theater artist by examining her work schedule came from 2 places. One, the general perception that the performing arts in Philadelphia are healthy and thriving. Yet I know very few people who make their living mainly through performing or being an artist and have children, which is a pretty good indicator that it's not particularly sustainable, since you need kids for the future. Second, this is just totally anecdotal, but I was listening to actors one night complain about how like this whole group of other actors who are in like 5 or 6 shows every year, they get all the paid parts, and they're complaining about that. And meanwhile, I'm thinking, well, if you're an actor, if you're a successful actor, and you have to be in 5 to 7 shows a year, plus be a standard-sized patient, and do the Christmas show at Macy's, that means you're busting your ass just to stay above poverty line. If you were in New York, you'd be in 1 show and 1 all year, and you'd have all your bills paid. So I wanted to look at that perspective from within and without the community, and just sort of show what somebody who's a successful person in Philadelphia as a performer, what their schedule is actually like. And I contacted Charlotte because not only is she a performer and an actor, but she's also a theater creator, so she bridges a couple of worlds there. That she just made the decision to make a change in her career, sort of added a really strong perspective to it. So I think it is important for those within the performing arts and those without to be aware that if you're at the top of your game and you are always financially insecure, overworked, and with the best possible future being more of the same, that is an indicator that the field in the area which you live is not healthy and it's not thriving. I know there are always exceptions, but I think the super, super duper exceptions are not very pertinent. A couple things I took away from the interview and that we were looking for was just to show that the ceiling for performing artists in Philadelphia or making a living as an artist is generally below the sustainable living line, especially if you're over 30. And if you're not over 30 yet, you will learn. And also that, you know, the foundation have created, or, you know, just from being here, created sort of allusion to a path for your own career. But they're not a substitute for like a real sustainable economy or a real, especially for an artist, individual artist. As Charlotte points out, the process was very circular. Every time she did a new project, it was like starting from the beginning. There was very little to build upon. So I think it's important when people talk about the arts economy or whatever you want to call it, you have to talk about what it is in Philadelphia, not what it is in New York, not what it is in LA. It's unrealistic. It exists here. It doesn't exist elsewhere. And we don't have TV and we don't have movies to supplement people's economy. But I would like to say this, and this is part of the reason I was interested in this. I grew up here. I'm a little bit over 40. When I was growing up here, there was no theater. There was no dance scene. There was shit. And everybody that went to college who was from Philadelphia left the city, and people who went to college in Philadelphia did not stay afterwards. So the whole generation of people and artists that have come here, that have stayed after U Arts and Temple, that is new, and that is big. And I think it creates a little bit of illusion that there is a system to fall back on. I think it's really important to note that. Like, there's no old model of success here. It's what you created. So I think a mass has been established, but now you have to think about the future, because that seems what is missing. How do you grow? We're kind of like, as an industry, we're all still in our mid-20s. Now we have to think about what it's like to be in our 30s and 40s and mature. So I think one thing that's important to think about as you think of these specifics, because it is important to know how to survive now, but what would a healthy Philadelphia performing arts company look like? Performing arts economy look like? And to think not just about yourself as an artist, but to think about your art and what would it look like? That to keep in mind in these challenges I think you're about to discuss, that I think it's important to know how to survive. It is important to know how to survive this small slice of economic pie we have, but the real important work after that is to expand that slice of the pie. I think anybody who's been in any kind of academic setting knows how people fight over very little. So I think it's important to expand that. And that healthy and thriving performing arts community, to find out what that would be, because it has never existed here. So what you're making is new. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Thank you so much. I just want to point out that we're so happy to have this room, but like I think my dream version, we're all sitting in a circle and we're not super, you know, formal. So really feel like if it's time for you to respond to something, like you can just you know, stand up and we can make it flow a little bit. But thank you so much.
Speaking of which, responding to things.
Yes.
We have no cards yet. So if you have one and you filled it out, by all means hold it up. Or if you have something that's on your card that you want to just voice out loud, you are welcome to stand up or otherwise make yourself known, and we'll kick this thing off.
in the meantime,
Everyone is really shy.
I can ask Amy to build a little bit on, I'm trying to think of some of the points that really jumped out to me and made me think, okay, let's jump right to Amy's tax information. So Amy,
Oh, I think there were a few that you said that jumped out here.
So,
Here, I have your sheet here.
Okay. Amy's a tax preparer for artists. So by filing artist taxes, she kind of also is advocating.
I know all of you and your
Yeah.
secrets. No, I do, between me and my partner Christine Capps, I think we do about 100 to 150 tax returns every year. Most of them are dance and theater artists in Philly, and I've been doing this work for about 10 or 12 years. This is one of the many things that I do to make a living as a dance artist and co-director of Headlong Dance Theater. So I just put together some data just as a way of, because I was authentically curious, like, has there ever been a moment when people were actually making more than they are now? Is it a myth that there was a moment when we were kind of better off than we are now? And my personal feeling is that like 5 or 10 years ago, we were in a more of a golden era, or at least it felt like there was more resource, there was more money, and there was more activity as a result of that. And I felt like there was more of a healthy ecosystem where artists were hiring other artists to work for them and with them, and renting venues and all of that kind of stuff that keeps the ecosystem healthy. So I looked at, I just picked 5 random artists who are my tax clients. I looked at their,
She's not naming names.
oh God, no, I did not do that. I looked at their returns from 2009 and from 2013, just as a random way of looking. Are you curious? Should I say what the different sources of income are? I could summarize too, but like Theater Artist 1, who's an equity artist, in 2009 she made $24,000 from teaching, $14,000 from acting, and $2,000 from unrelated, for a total of $40,000. In 2013, she made $9,000 from teaching, $18,000 from acting, so that was actually a bump up in the acting work, which is great, and again $2,000 from unrelated, for a total of $29,000. Dance artist number 1. In 2009, grants and commissions were $33,000. A day job that was in the arts but not making art was $12,000. Performance fees were $7,000, and dancing for other people was $5,000. So in 2009, that artist made $57,000. In 2013, that same artist had grants and commissions worth $9,000. Again, day job in the arts, $12,000. Performance fees, $9,000. Dancing for others, $0. Total $30,000. Theater artist 2. God, it makes me want to cry. I really love this artist. Acting, from acting in 2009, this artist made $9,000. Teaching, $3,000. Unemployment compensation of $9,000. This is normal for actors, for a total of $21,000. In 2013, the same artist from acting made $4,000. Teaching, $0. Unemployment, $8,000, for a total of $12,000. And you can live in Philadelphia for $12,000, but it's not easy. Dance artist number 2, who has a company, from their own company made $26,000 in 2009, had a day job that was art making, kind of, for another $29,000, teaching and commissions another $13,000. So this is a middle class artist, a rare bird in my world, making $68,000 that year. In 2013, the same artist had $18,000 from their own company, $9,000 from a day job in the arts, $28,000 from teaching and commissions, for a total of $55,000. And then the last one I'll talk about is someone who in 2009 had grants worth $12,000, a day job in the arts for $7,000, and from dancing for other people made $13,000, for a total of $32,000. In 2013, this artist had $0 in grants, moved to New York, got a day job that paid better for $21,000, and made $7,000 from dancing for artists, for a total of $28,000. So averaging around a 30% drop between 2009 and 2013, which is pretty, that feels about right from my observations of kind of all of you as a whole. And should I just name some trends that I've been observing? Sure. I wrote those on a separate piece of paper. I've noticed artists not getting or giving up their 501c3, which I think is actually a positive trend, because I think 501c3s can be the death knell for a lot of artists to create and then maintain a 501c3 nonprofit organization. I've noticed the cultural fund, the Philadelphia Cultural Fund, moving towards supporting individuals and being open about fiscal sponsorship, which is a great a move in the right direction in my opinion, while Pew moves away from that. And if you look at their most recent list, there's only a couple of individual artists in their project funding. Mostly organizations are getting that money. My own feeling from running Headlong is that it used to be a little bit more Pew and William Penn would fund projects and then we would hire dancers, and so the money would kind of trickle down. Those dancers would make their own work and hire their own dancers, like Nicole. And that trickling down has petered off. So I'm not able to hire as many people as I was able to hire 5 or 10 years ago. Another trend I've noticed is that teaching jobs are scarcer and pay less. So those of you that got MFAs in your field and spent $50,000 for that privilege and now can't find a full-time teaching job and are teaching that job for $50,000, that's just enrages me. And it's hard to get those adjunct jobs, so that enrages me even more. There's a lot less touring for dance companies. That used to be a pretty substantial source of income for Headlong and for some other small companies. I'm looking around to see some of the other people that have been. And there was activity here 40 years ago. I just wanted to say that.
There was a force, but there wasn't.
Yeah.
It was not much.
For theater, I just want, like, you know, Terry Chalk is in the room, like, they're in Laurel. There's people who've been doing this work for me for decades. And so they might not have been as visible as we wanted them to be, but they've been here doing this work. But I think we'd all agree that there's less touring and less earned income for dance. And then I've just noticed a lot of artists leaving the field, leaving Philadelphia, or getting unrelated jobs that are unrelated to their artist work. So not to be the bearer of bad news, but those are just some things I've observed recently as someone who has intimate knowledge of a lot of people's personal finances. And I think the thing that hurts me the most about the Charlotte thing, and this is true for some other artists in this room, is that I really want Charlotte to keep making her work.
Yes.
You know, I want this to be a community that supports the Charlotte Fords of the world and the Sarah Sanfords of the world, so that they can be here making their work and making our community a more vibrant, artistic community. So that's what I'm hoping for. I don't know, I shouldn't be calling on you.
Yes, stand.
Stand up, stand.
No, I just wanted to respond, because I'm by no means an advocate of pews per se, as some of you in the room know, but one interesting thing though about fiscal sponsorship that I learned from one of the officers is that they changed their guidelines this year. They didn't say this publicly, but they changed their guidelines to permit fiscal sponsorship because they were seeing higher quality applications coming from independents and freelancers, curators, etc., than were coming from the mainstream organizations that tend to populate their roster. So they had actually been vehemently against fiscal sponsorship for over a decade and reversed that, as many of you know, in this last revision. I think though the problem remains that, you know, a lot of people have been talking about more on the side of sort of their conversation around excellence and definition of excellence, which is very specific, and not terribly embracing of the diversity in the field. That in sort of my view is more of the syndrome, or if there is a problem to diagnose on their side and say the issue of fiscal sponsorship. But I just wanted to share that because I thought that was an interesting insight that unfortunately it would have been nice if they shared that, because that actually is sort of encouraging of the individual community, even though their outward practice tends to seem discouraging or be discouraging in terms of how it's gotten fewer artists more money, fewer projects more money in its trend. So I just wanted to share that.
How much of that decline that you just sort of reported on do you think is unique to artists versus other professions?
Well, I don't know. I mean, we were at the bottom of the recession in 09, 10. I think officially, in terms of like macroeconomic, you probably know more about this than I do.
Not much.
We're not in a recession right now,
Yeah.
but it feels like that for us. And I feel like
We tend to lag behind.
yeah, for us, I feel like we've kind of lagged behind. So like a construction worker who wasn't working in 09 probably is working now, but an artist that maybe still have benefited from some of the grants and touring engagements and things that were lined up before the crisis happened in '09 are now kind of feeling the ripple effect, but I don't know.
And I think there's a lot of question about, we will get to, I promise, there's a lot of question about whether, whether the world has actually changed for artists, or whether, the recovery is right around the corner, because we do tend to lag behind other industries in that way. All right, somebody in the back.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm Jay. I would also love to know, I don't know if you have this data or if you could find it, but finding it and sharing it would be great, I know we're talking about problems in Philadelphia, but what other artists in other cities of similar sizes, of similar cultural ethos, whether their incomes are doing the same thing. And that would just be helpful to know in terms of troubleshooting. So I don't know if anybody has access to that. I know we're already talking about how hard it is to get data, but it would be great to know and to share, I feel like.
Yeah, and we can certainly aggregate anything we can find, and Lois, I know you have stuff to share on
I
that.
just want to say there are national service organizations, and they are collecting data up the wazoo right now. Certainly the NGSA is working on the compensation survey. Does it include the full spectrum of artists in all genres? No, probably not, but you could look for bigger trends. I will say that the phenomena of the capricious foundation syndrome, I'm calling it, or the reckless foundation syndrome, is happening in other cities, and it was a big topic at the NGSA conference. It's happening in Houston, it's happening in Boston, and it's also happening in California right now, and there's a little bit of it starting to happen in Chicago. There's a Grantmakers in the Arts conference going on in October in Miami, and Amy Fitter will be there to talk to funders on behalf of dance. But this is an issue that national service organizations are very aware of. It's not just happening in Philly. It's like flowing through the whole nation right now.
I could add a little bit of it. There's also like a survey that's been happening, I think maybe it's been going on for 2 years now, of visual artists, primarily in New York, that's sponsored through the Artist Space, where they're basically asking visual artists, have you been paid? Which for visual artists is usually more the question of, did you get paid?
It's online, right?
It is.
There for, yes.
Yeah.
All right, we'll get started.
Have you been paid and by whom for what kind of visual artwork? Like, did you get paid for installing a show? And that kind of thing. Usually visual artists don't see income unless a sale happens, which can be very rare. So that's sort of the issue for visual artists, and there is some data being collected on that as well, but it's interesting to cross-section.
Yeah. Terry goes to you.
Hi, Terry Shockers in CEC. I guess this known, it's been, that in terms of government funding, the city of Philadelphia has always been pretty far down in terms of what they contribute to the arts community. And I certainly don't think that has improved. So, and I think a lot of times, I don't really know what's going on in many other cities, but it appears that if your government, the city and state, have a little bit more money to help, they're a little bit healthier than the ones at the bottom. It's common sense, I guess. This is the case.
Definitely true.
Hi, my name is Monica. I just would like to know if you could elaborate a little more about your how much you made on 501c and why you don't think it's a good idea to go that route, and what's the alternatives that you might?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, and maybe Meredith, if you want to speak to this, I've seen, just anecdotally, like Tana Isaac, Melanie Stewart, Meredith Rainey, Kate Watson-Wallace, a lot of dance artists that I know have decided to shut down or put their 501c3s on the freezer, in the freezer, what's the term?
On ice.
On ice, thank you. Because the work of running the 501c3 was so burdensome for them, and I can certainly, as someone who runs a 501c3, I understand that, and I agree with that, and I often advise younger artists not to go through that process because, yes, you can have access to foundation grants that are not currently available to individuals or fiscally sponsored people, but the work of running it is, to me, a much bigger liability than the asset of potential funding. Because you have to really have your financial shit together, you have to have a board, you have to meet with that board, you have to keep good minutes, like all of that stuff. Yeah, Jess, you just inherited
I just inherited a 19-year-old pharmacy. Don't tell me that.
It's really difficult. So that's one of the things that I think has been been hard for artists who were encouraged to set up 501c3s, did so, were good responsible citizens of the community, filed their 990s with the IRS and all that, but then the support wasn't necessarily there to keep that thing running. And there's no Gen Op support. Like to hire someone to run your 501c3 for you is really challenging. Yeah, I'm looking at Nicole, Meredith, Jess. Like, it's hard to find money for the art when you're done. It's hard to find money. It's like either you're funding the programs or you're funding the operations, and you can't have both. And both are unsustainable.
All right, so one comment, and then I'm going to tell you what's floating from the cards.
Wait, I just want to quickly follow up on what Amy was saying. My name is Mark. So two things that have happened in recent years that are, I guess, potentially reversible that have made the 501c3 thing particularly odious / impossible or difficult. The first is that there used to be a small potatoes exemption that would get you out of the 990 if you were kind of a certain size, which would let somebody that had a small company, which I did, have all the benefits. And if you at least periodically dipped below a certain scale, you were sort of allowed out of a lot of the hard parts. And the second thing is the Cultural Data Project. Being able to like fill out that stuff and invent from whole cloth like everybody else does the data that goes. Just is too time consuming. So those are just two things that have kind of like weighed down the 501c3.
Yeah. It's true. A lot of data goes along with being a nonprofit. It is true. All right. So hang on to your comment, please. I am going to surface for you guys some of the stuff that's coming up from the cards. So a reminder to you, if you have cards, send them on down. I'll get those out there.
In the situation circle.
We're going to move out there pretty short. So from the cards that we have down here, there are sort of two main themes. Not surprisingly, one of them is about cash. Right? This is my long-running sort of joke, but it's true. That whenever you get a group of people in the arts together and ask them what they need, the first answer will always be money. Right? It will always be money, whether that's people working in the arts, whether that's organizations, whether that's individual artists, anyone in this field. That's always the first answer. So we'll move past that one, because the second one I think is really interesting. The second thing that arose out of a lot of these cards is a theme around people and connections and that kind of support and creating a greater network. A couple of people mentioned that in terms of training, right, with programs like ArtistU, or thinking of a way to do some cross-generational mentorships, so that some of the artists who have been practicing and who maybe have raised a family and bought a house in this community over time can work with other artists who are on the verge of that part of their life, or who are trying to think about creating a sustainable life. A lot of comments about, how can we think about crossing over with other industries? Where can we put our skills to other uses that are interesting to us, but also, financially beneficial? Thinking about maybe shared systems of administration and other types of administrative support, and thinking about a central sort of place for people to find things. And I mean place sort of not necessarily a physical space, but, a place. Like a clearinghouse for job opportunities, for example, or for people who can work with other people, that kind of thing. So those are the things coming up out of those cards. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add to the thread of what's happening in terms of this situation that you might want us to think about? Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think one of the things that I'm Adrienne Mack, I'm Swing Pony Performing Arts. One of the things I've been thinking a lot about as I've become more skilled as a grant writer is I was a chemistry major in college, and I actually wrote a thesis, and I wrote a grant to the NIH. And the thing that strikes me that is so different about the way that you write grants for science foundations versus art foundations is that if you proposed a project that you knew the outcome of to a science foundation, you would never get funded. But if you know the answer to the question, why do you need the money to carry out the experiment? And I think one of the things that I've actually pulled away from lots of project grants, because they are so restrictive in what you have to define ahead of time. They are so restrictive in terms of the reporting requirements, and they actually block the artistic process in some really fundamental ways, because there's no a room for reasonable amounts of risk. And I'm not saying you have to give me all the money and I'll do fart around for 10 years, but I do think that research and development and the very essence of that sense is what the artistic process is about. And it's frustrating to me that there are so many industries that understand that, whereas that aspect of the creative process, which is like the thing that we're the best at, is something that our funders don't validate.
Charlotte, do you have something that related to all of
Yeah. Hi, I'm Charlotte. I think my question was, so I came to a point where I was like, I can't survive off grant to grant because the grants don't pay me enough, the grant is over, I'm unemployed, and I just have to make more than around 15,000 to 18,000 a year, which is normally what I make. And so I need a salary. I would go into academia, that's a bad, hard place to go into right now. So if you're not supposed to start a nonprofit now, then how do you get a salary as an artist? That's why I was like, all right, I'm gonna try and get a salary from a different field that has a 100% higher rate, that's flexible. I'll come back and make my work and not be under the constant stress of poverty and feeding myself, which is well documented in many fields as being like a terrible thing for your health, for your mental health. Like it's really bad for my art. Like I just can't, it's making me not want to make art. It's making me bitter. So my question is there a way, yeah, if the nonprofit model doesn't work anymore, is there any way within the arts to get a salary actually making your own work? Does anyone know?
That's the perfect segue to the next question. No, I think that is a huge central issue here, right? Is that landscape is rapidly changing, and this is a question that the field is really struggling with. I think you've seen a lot of comments that sort of float around that idea, but I think you put it very succinctly. Yeah.
I don't know, we might be transitioning, I'm sorry, but
no, that's good, let's transition.
I guess like on that point, I don't know if anyone from the funding community is here.
I asked them not to be here.
Great, cool.
I'm sorry with you guys, I said I didn't want funders or presenters here so that we could speak freely.
Cool.
I sent some emails to people and said, please don't come.
Yeah. Which makes great sense. My question, I guess, it does feel a little bit like they should weigh in, like at some point. And I'm not even talking about like the government kind of leg of things, because you can kind of like publicly like push them. You can't do that so much with the private guys. And it's sort of like, what are they thinking about all this? Are they? I don't know. So I wonder about that as like an idea.
Including them in this conversation.
And what's the sort of accountability?
Right. Yeah.
Could you identify, by the way?
Oh, I'm Annalisa.
That's all you have to say. That's all you want to say. So I think that let's pick that up again when we get perhaps to action, because we're going to pose action question as who's responsible and for what. So I think that's great to put right there. Another place that I was going to take it, based on where Charlotte left off, is okay, how do we get salaries for making our art? I don't know, but there is a big area that we haven't talked about yet, which is the day jobs that some of us are working a lot of, or not at all because we don't want to, but that's a big part of how a lot of people, I believe, are making it work. So I would love to hear from anybody about their relationship to their day job or their choice to not have day jobs, because I'm actually really interested in starting with where we really are as a day job economy and making that work better because it's meeting the world where it is, instead of looking in the clouds for the salary to make my work.
I had a day job for 2 years at UART. I was an admissions counselor, and it was great. It was not a flexible job, but I didn't have to take it home with me. I was working with other artists. I got exposure to other, to faculty at UART. I got access to space. I got to talk to young teenagers about their art careers and, the pros and cons of going to art school and all kinds of cool stuff. And I was making work. And I had a studio and I could afford it, and it worked really well. I'm now the mother of 2 young children. I cannot work a day job. I mean, the balance of working a full-time day job so that you can pay for the childcare and then not ever see your children because when you're not working your day job, you are trying to make your work. This doesn't connect, it doesn't compute. So I feel like a day job solution can make sense for certain stages of an artist's career and for people who choose not to have children, which I support people to not have children. That was my choice, but it's an excellent choice, and specifically women need to feel okay with not having children because we have often been told not to feel okay with not having children. But yeah, for people who do want to have kids, the day job thing, I mean, the reality for me is that I fell in love with a person who wanted to go to business school, and I couldn't have planned that. but he's always been able to, even the lowest paying job that he's interested in getting is always going to pay more than what I would be able to make. So that's how it's worked out for us. And but if if that hadn't been the person, I don't know that I would have kids right now. So. Sorry, I'm Zoe.
So I took Zoe's other day job when she left at the school center, and I am a full-time working mom who is single and an artist. And when do I make my work, you ask? Between 8:30 and 10:30 at night after my kid goes to sleep, and it's not easy. But one way that I feel like I sort of addressed Charlotte's question is I found a day job that I can sort of incorporate into my artistic life. I write grants and I fundraise for Pig Iron, and it's inspiring and it's exciting to be around those kinds of people and to see the work they're doing and to be a part of it. It's to sort of, in a way, be expressing the ideas that are being generated collaboratively in that environment. So I've always had arts administrative jobs to support my painting habit. And I sold my work a lot, but for me it was never a full-time gig. I always had to pay my bills on a steady basis with jobby jobs, as I call them. And I think that for me, finding a way to find the day job in a place that means something to me was sort of the essential piece. And then I decided to have a kid, and then I decided to have a kid by myself. And, so, I was just trying to, kind of piece it all together, but maintain my artistic life as well, which is not easy, and it's not, so, that's sort of one way that I've approached how do I not let go of the art in my life. It's not always going to be about my art all the time. For me, that's sort of my solution. But it's an approach, and it's nice to be part of a community that I feel an affinity with, regardless of how much art I'm making, how much work is going on the wall, and how many shows a year I'm getting. I still can feel part of a community that is progressing art in our culture.
Hi, I'm Ben, Team Sunshine Performance Corporation. I too have a day job. I was a nanny for a long time, and now I have a part-time salary job working with kids, which is awesome. And I'm really glad to have it. I'm thinking about Charlotte's question, a lot of these other questions, and I'm somewhere in a situation, an idea, but I feel like there is no model. It can't be done. That I'm also a dedicated pessimist, but it's not possible without a day job. And so I'm wondering, given that you cannot do it without a day job, is there a way to lift some of the burdens of being an administrative artist so that if you're doing half of your life in a day job and half of your life in an art job, you can use more of that art half for art instead of a quarter of it for art and a quarter of it for grant writing? I'm also thinking about ways that could tie to development departments. I mean, the Pew grants are going to larger organizations. That's partially because of Pew, that's partially because of the way organizations are running. Also, development departments are like really good at writing grants. And though I'm getting better and better at writing grants, and I actually think I'm pretty good at it, the amount of time and effort it took me to get to this place is substantial. And I will never be as good at writing grants as someone who writes grants full time. And so, is there a way that, I mean, I would love if there was a development collective where there were a couple people that sat around writing grants all day for all of us. I don't know if that's possible.
Instead of the money tree, it's the writing tree.
I don't know, and I would happily pay those people $80,000 a year if I could have, if I could have 50. And then
Thank you for sourcing that idea, it's a good one, and it actually reflects what a few of these cards have said about figuring out how to work better with the local organizations who are here, and there have been a lot of different ideas suggested about that. That's a great one. A lot of people have talked about trying to think about how do we educate organizations about the plight of artists right now, and then how do we think about maybe setting some standards with them as well for that kind of work, and you have another really great idea there.
In the back.
I saw Juma earlier. Juma.
Oh, yeah, but I had my hands up way after, like.
Oh, you don't? Okay. Jay, in the back.
Sorry, I already spoke, so I'll make this quick. I don't want to be that guy. To answer the question, I only know one place, and I looked it up on my phone just because I wanted to be sure I wasn't misspeaking, that we should look into the sort of annual capacity of this. There's a Children's Theater in Minneapolis, Children's Theater Company. They have 4 full-time performing artists who are on staff. I'm pretty sure they're year-round. We should look into that. But it's just the one, like, the silver lining here is that there is at least one company in America that has at least 4, I think, full-time year-round artists. If anybody knows if that's not true, please correct me. But there are a few very rare instances where that is true, is what I wanted to say.
Now I just have my answer. I'm sorry. I'm Celeste. I guess my question then is also, Lois brought up that there are national organizations. I'm just wondering about the existence of and the desirability of umbrella organizations. Because, for instance, now the Greater Philadelphia Theater Alliance does not exist any longer. And, I don't know how much of that, I'm not pretending to be on the inside of that, but one of the things that is part of the question, it seemed to me, was how much do umbrella organizations take away the resources that should be going directly to artists? But so you have that competing model of, umbrella organizations can help the trickle down, but they also have to take a certain amount of the resources away from going directly to artists, and then there's a conflict. So that's just one of the things that I'm wondering about.
Sure. Response to that? Lois?
We're very sensitive to that, which is why we've been very, very careful about where we apply, and we have not done hardly any individual fundraising. Because what are you going to do? Go to the ballet, take out the program, write down the names, and go home and call this folks. I mean, it doesn't work. It's very hard as a service organization to find a way to keep your organization going without cannibalizing your constituents. But I want to talk about the day job thing, because at Dance Up, we have a great model. And I think there should be advocacy within arts organizations to borrow our model. So instead of hiring a full-time communications director with a communications person, hire 4 performing artists who are great at communications and let them timeshare the job. Everyone in our office is a working artist. They timeshare the jobs. They go away for 2 months. They come back. They still have a job. I have very little turnover. And also, they're in touch with a lot of resources, and it actually is helping their career. It's not a day job. It's fighting their career. And there are dance companies doing it. Strab, have any of you seen the fabulous company Strab? She hires her dancers to do some of the administrative work. So when there's no gig, they have work. And I think there's ways to make the administrative support structure the day gigs in a meaningful way.
I have an example of that, which is pretty cool. My name's Anne. About a year ago, I worked with a former professor to start a mural program in Wilmington that employed people in recovery and reentry. And all of the money came, for projects, came from the funders of the projects. But the umbrella funding of the organization that my professor started came from the Department of Mental Health. And it's really interesting that it has enabled artists who, I don't know what they would be doing without the space to work in a space, but also to be employed there, which is pretty cool. But since I'm not a mental health consumer, I don't get to be paid by that organization, which is funny that I come here today because this is my 6th day of my full-time job. So it's an education, so I'm really stoked about it, but it's not an art.
And the artists that are employed by that program, what are they restricted to the kind of art that they're supposed to be making in their own residence?
No,
or?
not at all. It's really open.
David.
My name is David. I just wanted to reinforce what Lois said. I was just at the Yard, and
Martha's Vineyard, so that's an organization run by David White. And every person who works there, from administrative staff to technical staff, it's a dance center where they bring in touring companies and incubate artists who work in residency. So they're in an island community, and kind of amazing. Everyone who works there is a dance artist. And so it's a built-in community for all the programs and initiatives. So there's a morning class, and everyone goes and takes morning class. And you don't have to worry, are people going to come from morning class? Because everyone there is a working artist who also comes. And so I think the building administrative structures out of part-time working artists is phenomenal. It pays dividends in all kinds of ways.
I'm sorry, David, what was the name of that organization?
The Yard.
The Yard?
So, yeah.
I'm Juma Tatu Ho, and I wanted to share, because we were talking about day jobs, I wanted to share some information about a day job that I have that I think has worked really well for me, and it's a job in academia, which I would recommend everybody getting into, and I think there's particular interest, but the reason that I applied for the job is because it's a part-time position, and it's a part-time benefits-bearing position. And I've been there now teaching. I think I'm about to go into my 5th year there, and they've been really great about supporting me in the position. And recently, I've been talking to them about being there just 1 semester out of the year, as opposed to being there 2 years, both semesters. And I know that I think the head of the program, I know, reached out to some other heads of departments about this position, and the head of our program, she was saying that she really hadn't encountered any other positions like it, at least in the area, because she'd been interested in having a roundtable discussion about how to create more sustainability among positions like these, and she found that there weren't really any positions like this. There was lots of adjunct work, but I think that this, like Annalisa, you were saying that there could be involved in these conversations with these foundations, also the heads of dance programs, because I think that they're a huge part of our arts economic ecosystem. And I think that there's also, it feels like there's also a lot of kind of like hush-hush approach to how much people get paid and stuff like that, which feels, I don't know if it's connected to kind of the shame that I feel like artists have about admitting how little they get paid, or in some instances how much they've been paid for a project. I think there's all kinds of shame around winning that I think is also a huge part of this.
So you put out a phrase that I think is a really good one for us to hang on to, because I think it describes some of that ideal day job, like part-time benefits bearing. Right? All right. And I think that might go hand in hand with, if there's a way to create something with this idea of relief for the artistic administration, right, in the other half, of your life. So there are some definitely good ideas surfacing here. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sally. I only know of one case of an artist getting a salary, and I call it the Chuck Mee case. I don't know if anyone knows the playwright Chuck Mee. He's an amazing artist. He had the great fortune to go to school and become very good friends with somebody who ended up being very high up in Merrill Lynch. And what that friendship did is he noticed that Chuck was struggling to have a life, and so he offered to pay him a salary, that he would essentially become Chuck's patron. And this relationship has been going on, I think now for something like 15 or 20 years. He put Chuck's kids through school, he pays health benefits. Okay, I'm not saying that this is something that we are all going to go on.
I would take that.
But I do think that there's, I think that what we see with like Kickstarter and Indiegogo is that there is an interest in individuals giving to art. I do think that giving, this is just my opinion, that probably giving large amounts of money to an individual artist, like there's a weirdness there, I feel like. And I wonder if there's a way to harness individual donation energy for individual artists. I think organizations have a little bit of an easier time with tax write-offs and things like that.
Great. That, okay. I think that's great and brings us kind of starting to get into grassroots. And I think we've done a lot of presentation of different situations that are going on. And I know we're kind of all over the place too, but so thinking about the different things we've talked about, we've done a little bit of success storytelling, but we've also done a lot more identifying issues and hopefully more of what we need. But grassroots brainstorming meet is where we're headed, and we'll take a break at some point too. But let's review some of the things we talked about that are good and that were, this could work for me if I had blank. We talked about collective administrative support. We talked about day jobs that embed the artists into an organization. I mean, you know, that has to be, like an organization has to be matched with the artist, so I think that works sometimes, but there's probably a lot more artists out there than organizations that could work for them. But also, I'm really, really interested in what else day jobs can be that they aren't currently now. And maybe even putting that together with what Sally just said about getting people who are already individual givers to have the intention to put it directly to an artist. I think a lot about the way that, to me it seems obvious and kind of like mainstream culture that if you have to buy something, say a hardware purchase, and you have the option of going to a big chain like Home Depot or the hardware store, people tend to, if they have the choice in a certain situation, they tend to go to the small business, right? Because there's this idea that like if I support this small business, it's gonna, you know, benefit the whole economy. But I'm only in this situation right now because I have this need, it serves me, and you know, I have to improve my house. But what if people that are already spending money on things and also already agree that it's good to support artists in the economy are just kind of spending their money on the thing they want, and it goes to the artist. Does that make sense? And so I guess what I mean is that I wonder if that reveals a category of day jobs that are kind of there but not really created or formalized yet. I guess another way to say this is I spend some time in the corporate world to piece it together, and I do sometimes I plan events for the University of Pennsylvania and things like that. And I see production people get hired all the time in worlds outside of the arts, for example. And they do an okay job and they get paid really well. And they come and go, and the person who pays them doesn't care who they're paying as long as the job gets done. And so I think about what if there was this other work happening outside of that exchange, where just ensured that it was the artists who got paid to show up and do that gig, and they had those creative skills and they did it really well, and then went back and like made the work, and you know what I mean? So there's these different pieces of a system that already exists that I wonder if there's a different way to reorganize them, while embracing the fact that, hey, day jobs are what support us, but day jobs are the thing that we could kind of redesign a little bit.
There are also, this conversation makes me think about, there are also some government funding programs that support arts organizations and schools, actually the one I'm thinking about does this, where the incentive for the arts, the recipient of the funds, right, is to do the artistic or educational work, but the incentive for the giver of the funds is that they get tax relief from the state for making that donation. And so maybe there's another way to think about that idea too, of like the person who's giving the money to the artist, you know, what's the incentive that they need to be able to make that donation beyond the idea of the art itself? Because for some people there is an incentive beyond the art itself that they need,
right.
Or a structure that you can think about or manipulate in a way that sort of is a win-win for everybody involved.
But what about if the incentive is, it doesn't have to do with the artist, and
right.
because they're making a purchase.
Right, that's what I mean.
Or they're hiring a person.
That's what I mean. for these organizations who are giving money to artists and schools, or to arts organizations and schools, they're doing it to get a tax break.
Right.
They're not doing it necessarily purely out of the motivation of, you know, I want to support these arts organizations at these schools. They're doing it for tax relief from the state.
Right.
You know, so they're getting a commodity that they want.
What you're talking about made me think about like a temp agency or something.
Yeah,
Like that.
yes.
Job
And
that
then,
artists
yeah,
would
like
like
a
to do
resource.
maybe, if
Yeah.
they can do their art,
Right.
that pay decent money that someone found and
Right.
had a, you know, and maybe so. that
Right, so
sense
you
of
just
being
show up and you
more
get sent to the job.
entrepreneurial,
Yeah.
also on, you know, on an individual level as well. I know people who are doing, you know, crazy stuff like distribution of flyers, and I know someone who do a terrible job. And I think, oh, when I retire, I can do that, and I can do that for a lot of people in the arts, and I would do an amazing job. And I probably wouldn't charge that much because I love art. You know, so I just think the idea of being more entrepreneurial might start to.
Right, I mean, so as artists, you have so many skills that you've developed and used to make your art, but those skills also do all of these other things. And your skills in those areas are potentially higher than people who aren't having them to create art. So I'm thinking, you know, we talk about this idea of a temp agency. What if it was a place where jobs are only available that sought out people with highly sophisticated production skills? And so it's just borrowing on things that you're doing regularly in your practice, except on those days you make like 3 times as much money by the hour, and then that covers, you know, the days that you're making your work. These are things that I dream about. They're not gonna end.
So there were a couple of other good ideas from these cards that I'm just going to float out there, and then I want the rest of you to put your hands right back up. So one is that really intrigued me is the idea of a city-funded space that's free for artists. Right, so there's some sort of process by which you get a certain number of hours per year that you can work in this space, but for you it's free, right?
I think back to that,
yeah.
there was a meeting like last year, I think about percent for art kind of stuff.
Right.
And the idea that I had at that meeting, which would go with this, is that instead of percent for art going to large monumental sculptures made of metal, that percent for art should be a percentage of any new building built, should have space within it for artists to use as workspace. So it should have a theater or have studio space that is free or very subsidized for artists, and that's the percent for art.
That's interesting. That's a good one too. And I should tell you guys, there is, City Council is even having this discussion. There was a resolution introduced last week, right at the end of the budget process, looking into sort of artist sustainability and for new and emerging artists in particular. They're now in recess for the summer, but they will pick it back up in the fall. So be on the lookout for that. That's a great.
Which is December for City Council.
Yes. But it, you know, they put it out there. Another one that I thought was really interesting was the idea of figuring out how to facilitate more split bills or shared performance opportunities for people, so that you don't bear the burden of the entire thing by yourself. Other
John, you have your hand up, right?
Oh, it's just, you know, Terry, I think the idea of sort of like a temp agency is interesting, but to kind of like think about it in maybe slightly more attractive terms. I think, you know, there's an interesting thing. I don't have a sense that in Philly there's the kind of outlets for sort of holistic artist management that there are in some other cities. And so, you know, I think if there was a clearly defined need for that someone could really see an opportunity to sort of make a go of it in that world. But I don't know. I mean, I you know, people may differ and may know of resources that are, you know, more available. But I do think that sort of that might be an opportunity here in the city that's going underexploited because maybe the right people haven't decided to do it.
And I'm Jenna, but for people who are interested in this model, the Brooklyn Commune, Andy actually has started something called the Agents of Awesome, which is in New York, so you should definitely look at that if you're interested in this model. It's very, very new, but
I love this name.
Hi, I'm Susanna.
the artist space idea, the Lower Manhattan Cultural Council for a long time has had an artist residency program where they kind of are the nexus for people with temporarily vacant spaces, either corporate or storefront. And then they do, you know, by application, artists can get those spaces either for performance or rehearsal creation or a combination of the two. Now, obviously, there's way more demand for those spaces than there are spaces to give, but it's a pretty reasonable program, and I'm curious if anything like that is happening in Philadelphia. I know the Mural Arts program has started to do something like that, but it's not external by application, it's for their own internal existing projects. They'll take over a vacant storefront for a year and turn it into a gallery. But it's something that's easy enough to do, and perhaps there's a way to make an application process for that so that it's not so onerous and feeding into all the other kind of administrative problems we were talking about, but it's a pretty useful thing.
There is.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, there programs like that, for instance, in the South Street District.
Yeah.
Empty, vacant spaces, but it's been an initiative of the actual district, not.
I'm Hannah. I think that I'm not the best person to speak to the details of this in any way, but that the cooperative model is one that we should remember to include in this discussion. Makerspace Co-op up in Northern Liberty's Fishtown, Kensington area has been going for 10 or more years at this point and has been a really wonderful home for a lot of particularly dance artists, but more broadly performing artists now. And is working very intensely to discover a lot of all of the checkpoints on that 6-point list of what is the professional development that we can provide for each other, what is the space that we can provide for each other, and there are tiers of engagement that cost different amounts to use the space, but it's very reasonable, and you get a lot of support for your art making as well as a sharing of the administrative duties to run the co-op. I think it has its holes, but it also has really wonderful models to offer. So,
what do you think about the scale of the way Masher has been able to sustain itself, and can that scale up to include a greater population? That kind of model, not Masher specific.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. It's a very good one. I wonder also how much multiple co-ops working in concert with one another can do something versus one giant co-op.
Co-ops in general function better when they're a little bit smaller.
Yeah.
But coalitions of co-ops have been improved to be.
Coming to consensus with even 15 people is really challenging.
Yeah.
So getting 100 people in the room to move an organization forward in a certain direction is, I can't imagine. I don't want to go to those meetings.
You're in one now. Kind of.
My name is David. I think a lot of the things that we're talking about has collectivism and harnessing resources underneath it. And I guess I just wanted to say that more Mashers. That's awesome. and rather than scaling up, I just say more Mashers.
Sure.
More, any time a few people can come together and share resources, amazing things are going to start to happen. And I think there's a kind of a philosophical barrier, though. The collectivism and sustainability on the one hand, and achievement and excellence. The idea of achievement and excellence, they really work against each other. So if you're an artist and you're like, I'm going to be the exception to the problem, I'm going to be the one who gets whatever it is in your field, that is the big grant, the big role, or the big whatever, and you're like, I'm holding out for that thing. I think that thing is, in many, many different ways, it prevents sustainability. Right? So I just offer that. I think, when the foundations talk about excellence, it's always, to me, a super red flag. So when we first came to Philadelphia in the early 90s, we and many other people had this conversation. It's like the foundation of the work here, excellence and world class, blah, blah, blah. And it's always, that means that there's not a investment in the ecosystem. Right? Foundations are terrible at picking, you know, what great artists are. So, but I would say in our personal lives that like achievement and excellence has some like real barriers in terms of us doing the kind of collective planning that is like, what makes my life sustainable today, right? As opposed to some trade-off or some moment where somebody's going to fund me because I'm so much greater than everybody else, right? So that's all I guess I wanted to say is just that this generation of folks seems so much more collectively inclined without that kind of, in my day, you know, we were trained in Marxism because we weren't collectively inclined. You know? And I remember that a meeting like this in the 90s when we first got to Philadelphia, that was at the Wilma, and we were beating each other up every night, like, this is so sweet. But the thing that Marxism gave us was like, you know, some like, let's do it. So partly I'm just like, yeah. And make administrative co-ops that do grant writing, make space co-ops that produce each other's work, and not to get anywhere, but just to make things sustainable every day.
My name's Melissa. I'm just listening to all of this, and I can't help but think that we're still talking about splitting the pie, and I'm excited about the collective aspect of it, but there's still this whole other world outside of the people in this room that in order to sustain what we do, we have to reach them, and I think that we as artists we spend so much time like trying to reach each other and get each other to our works, and something about artistic excellence, like we want the respect of our artistic peers, but also there's this whole world of people that are so new to what we do and would be so excited to support us and continue to buy tickets for your work and my work, that I would be excited about collective work in outreach and marketing.
Are you thinking about any sets of people or subsets of people in particular, or are you just thinking people writ large?
Broadly, I mean, if we're going to talk about a development collective that's reaching these dwindling world of funders, then why not think about a collective that isn't necessarily just about neighborhoods or, you know, about a particular district, but that's about the arts community. So I think about, you know, reaching out to, like, it can be part of the same thing. Reaching out to the corporate world can also be about selling tickets to the shows and marketing our skills. You know, that kind of community outreach between artists and other industries. Might also be enlivened by us leaving the arts for day jobs.
The second half tonight,
infiltrate.
wanting to know artists are in Philadelphia was this dream of like a corporate advertising budget-sized PR campaign that wasn't selling any one of our shows, but it was introducing the artists that live in Philadelphia to the city of Philadelphia through ads.
Like what happened with?
Yeah, like here they are, they're everywhere. You know, the way that so many other ads are. Here we are, wherever it's
on a couple of these cards too. The great public service sort of campaign.
So that's what I'm thinking of by your comment. Erica.
Hi, my name is Erica Hawthorne, and I am with Small Mighty Arts, so I kind of snuck in as a funder, but not really. I'm an artist first and foremost, and so this conversation is for me. Every time I find what I call my tribe of people, I get really, really excited. My experience is a little bit interesting because as an artist, when I quit, because I felt like I did as an independent artist, it got really hard. And I got really stressed. And so my version of quitting and coming back into it was getting what I felt like maybe at the root of the issue, what I was experiencing, which was how do we keep our momentum so we don't give up? And maybe that is small grant and small funding. So when people are saying things about sourcing, funding, that really touches me because I feel like I kind of stepped outside of it a little bit
to do the thing that nobody was doing for an artist, which was applying for grants or doing this funding. We get emerging artists that apply that can't do an Indiegogo because they don't have the following yet, but that doesn't make their work any less valuable because maybe they don't have 100 people that would give them $50. So I'm really interested in a new model where we do kind of source what funding looks like for us, because what I face now coming into this world of being part artist, part looking for funding is, one, having to explain to people that this old idea of what they view an artist to be is misinformed. That's why I use the word entrepreneur a lot, because it gives a little bit more seriousness to the work and how we're approaching it that I think is important. And this weekend we had a creative swap that Debbie came to. So we got creative with how to source resources among ourselves, which I think is the strongest thing that we have in our creative community. Honestly, I feel like everything I would need is in this room, and we haven't even touched on all the artists in the room. So I don't want to take away from what we have amongst ourselves, but I think knowing what the face looks like and how we have to do the work of informing the community, the value of our work, even when I said we wanted to give small grants, I had to be very specific what that meant the grants went to. It wasn't just for somebody who just put on production, but the nuts and bolts that went into doing that production, the paying of the staff, which were usually other creatives. And I feel like that conversation and those conversations are increasingly really important, of educating the community of people who I agree will support us and fund us, but more conversations about what that collective funding model and efforts look like are really interesting as well.
All right, we have time for a couple more thoughts in the idea frame. So, Debbie, you get to choose.
JJ.
Hi, my name is JJ. I work as a photographer, and I photograph a lot of performing arts, and I recognize a lot of faces here who make really beautiful work. I have two tangential, unrelated thoughts that I'm just going to throw out there. Because a couple people have mentioned Indiegogo and Kickstarter and yada yada. I've had moderate success with those platforms, and I think they do offer a really powerful tool for funding. There is a challenge with them. I've taken in a bunch of money on 2 of them, and a lot of pledges that didn't manifest on the 3rd. We also backed about 150 of them, so and every time, right, it's this powerful tool, but every time money, I'm backing your project, you're backing my project, Amazon is shaving 7%, Kickstarter is taking 7% out of our global, or local regional arts economy. And so I think there's a need, and I'm kind of looking at Thaddeus right here, but I think there's a need for an infrastructure that provides that same crowdfunding model that has a set cost, and the more people buy into it, the lower the percentage that gets cut out gets. That is a nonprofit crowdfunding model, and I think the government should do that, or I think a foundation should do that, or some such. The other thing is, as a photographer, I have seen, I just want to echo that sentiment about marketing, like the stuff you guys do in this room is freaking amazing. And I remember in 2003 when I threw myself into the Fringe Festival and took about 30,000 pictures of it. What you guys do is fleeting, and I think, you know, I don't know, I'm curious how many other visual artists or filmmakers or video folk there are here, because I see a lot of dancers and theater folk.
There are visual artists here though. Maybe they could raise their hands. Hanging in the corner.
There's
like 4.
I have a couple random other ideas in my own brain about making it more sustainable for folks like me to support guys like you. But I think that's like that marketing push is huge, because people will respond to what they see. It's just you only have so many people in the room and then it's gone. So I'm just putting myself out there as someone who wants to work with you guys on that media marketing capital thing. I'm switching my business model over the next year so that I will charge $1 to anyone who's in this room. Because I don't want to, the copyright model and the ways that I've been working in the past of like not kind of restricting where your stories go out is something that I want to be a cheerleader. Let's talk more about.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right, Danny, you have your hand up as well.
So I think Michelle, was it?
Melissa.
Melissa, sorry. I was really interested in what you said. I think a big problem that is also not being talked about, that I talk about with Annalisa a lot at work, is the lack of demand. I have a lot of friends who aren't really interested in theater, and I pushed and asked them like 6 times to come see my recent show, and was like, come out and see it. It's about gay men. You're going to love it. You're gay. You'll enjoy it. And I only got about like, I would say 1/4 of those people to come out and see it. And I think the biggest problem with that is that these people aren't inclined to view theater. They aren't inclined to do art. They're thinking, this is my money for the week and I would like to go spend it on drinking. or something else. And I think a lot of that goes back to arts education, and then also about just about how we are marketed. And I think some of that is like the tourism sector, and how do we make Philadelphia a hub? Like everyone knows, go to New York because that's where Broadway is. How do we make Philadelphia this hub for viewing work? And then also, how do we get our education system in America to be about coming and using art and being art participants? So I think that's really something that we have to think about to help to build demand for ourselves, and that's going to get more funding exposure.
Yes, and I want to point back to taking a look at the Brooklyn Commune research that they've done. One of the crazy things that they did was uncover this book written by two economists. It was published in the 60s, and it's now it's totally unavailable. And like they sort of serendipitously got access to this book that talked about the broken performing arts economy and spelling out that there's a market economy where over time you get better at identifying demand and products for it and efficiencies and taking out the humans out of the equation because you don't always need them as you get better at technology. Then the performing arts economy, which is never going to get more efficient. And
because it requires actual people.
So, you know,
like that's the,
a Shakespeare monologue that took however long it took to perform at any time is never going to get faster.
You're going to speed up the rate of production or the rate of performance.
You're never going to be able to
substantive way that
take
saves
what
you
your
money.
demand is and then like respond to that and capitalize it in a different way by taking out the humans. So
it's literally called cost disease. The economic theory I was talking about earlier. But
so I thought that was really helpful to understand. I think that it doesn't mean stop creating demand for the arts at all, but I also think it's helpful to realize that we are forcing our work into a kind of economy that we constantly talk about when we talk about marketing, that it's not made for. So.
Right, so that is the central challenge around this. All right, so I have a question for everyone, and then we will get to a couple of you, I promise. So it's 20 till 8, right? I'm going to let you out of this room at 8. I'm definitely afraid to let you go on break now because I think some of you might not want that. So do you want to just keep going? All right, so let's keep going. And in about 5 minutes, we got to move to this, all right? Because otherwise we won't get there. Let's move there now. So. All right, well, those of you who had your hands up a second ago, are you moving in this zone? All right, put your hand up for a while.
Hi, I'm Shelly, and I'm going to touch briefly on what JJ Tiffany said, and even Melissa, and going on the collective or somebody representing us. I mean, what about the other 99%? We keep on telling about let's make more space, and we are making great work, but we only show up to support each other because we feel each other's plight. So there's a third important aspect here, which is shared space, shared grant writing resources, and a third, who's going to see what we make, these wonderful things, and we keep on wallowing over it. But the press, the media, it's blogs, it's the internet, or it's a printed thing, but how are especially performing arts different than let's say museums because they're present physically, like JJ said that you vanish in a second. And to take a very recent example is the Trey McIntyre project. Why do we all know about it? Because we don't have time to set one piece on it. So now even though they're dead, they are etched in dance history, right? So we need somebody who talks about our work in platinum terms, not about the new release, not just at the movies, not just at the art museum because they're huge, they're already getting money for that. Like we talked about, if you decide to do the art museum and not 300 smaller companies, we also need a press collective, somebody who's going to put this out in mainstream media, not just talk over Facebook like how we know each other. Because who's going to watch us after? I mean, let's face it, we need people to watch us, right? Sustainably, and that's where the city comes in, that's where public-private partnerships come in, that's where people commons come in. So we have more ideas that people commons. Talks about upcoming performances, so people don't say that, Shelly, you've been making Indian classical dance, but I didn't know you did it. Now I do, I want to stay in touch about what you do. So how do I keep on reminding these people when I'm not trained in media and journalism and writing press releases and quit doing dance because now learning how to write press releases and I'm Googling how to write a press release. Who do send this release to? So that's another one more piece, one last third piece to space sharing, grant writing sharing, marketing, like Melissa said. And reaching mainstream media, we need them. Like it or hate them, we still need them to talk about our work. So we can have own revenue that all funders want to hear about. before they give us money for funding. Because that's the question I get asked often. We love your work artistically, but where's your own revenue? So that's one more piece. Thanks for doing that.
Thank you. And your press is why we got here today too, right? An article came out, it was like, oh, we all know this issue, I want to talk about it, but the article got big enough where it made us want to get up and do something about it. Great.
I'm Bree, Full Irish Arts Collective. For a while, we've been talking about the digital space and how can we learn about like music artists, that they grow because people are listening and consuming their music online. Where is our space in the digital world to do something like that? Like, how can I take that piece that I made and have something that's compelling? Because everyone has this, and they're watching movies and things on this and on their iPads. How can we, kind of jumping off of what you were saying, JJ, and a little bit, like creating these type of materials. So you go on some people's websites, they might have something that someone sat in the back of the room and watched, and you know, there's people's heads bobbling around in it, and that's not compelling to someone to continue and watch it later on. How can we make some digital content that people are going to want to see? There's people that are making all kinds of money doing things on YouTube. Like, let's think about those type of models and how it can relate to the arts and the arts that we make.
I would just jump in. Yes, for marketing, but please, the beauty of what you do is the in-person experience.
Yeah, I mean, I don't
become a
take
YouTube
away
artist.
that at all, but a way to get people excited about it. So when so I can go on that lot. I see it a few times somewhere, and then I decide, okay, I can buy a ticket now because I got an understanding and appreciation for it. And that's how music artists are growing. Why can't we follow in those same footsteps?
Hi, Glenn again. It sounds like we're about to transition to actions, and as we make that segue, I just want to put cash at the front of the conversation again. I think it's like, because we love one another, and I think we do, it's easy to be like, sweet, we'll get together, we will share our abilities, and then that is going to be great. But I do think we got to make the pie bigger, and that comes from cash, because with cash I can market, with cash I can hire a development director, with cash I can hire an administrator. Like, what I need most is cash, and what I need the cash most for is to hire other artists to delay their day jobs on the weeks that I need them. And so, and I can't get rid of, I can't have them make me a priority without cash.
Thanks for getting us back there.
Yeah, a little bit. My name is Griffin. Kind of related to what everyone has been saying. Sort of reach. I grew up on the main line. Very, that has a reputation. And for a long time, while I was in college at Temple, I was a server, trying to make my way through there, and trying to also be in the Philadelphia theater community. And what blew my mind was all the people that came into my bar that I waited on when I told them that I was going to go to grad school and come back to Philadelphia and try to make my living as a theater artist. They were like, why do you want to do that? And there's like 2 theaters. And I was like, well, no, that's not really true. There's like 50 or something. But those people have a lot of money. A lot. How do we get the reach there to, I'm serious, to the main line, to Chestnut Hill, to these areas that I feel like people would actually want to use their money to support us, but don't actually know that we're here.
Right, that's where the press release comes in.
My name is Lauren, and I run a circus arts company. So I would like to speak to making the pie bigger. I founded our company in 2011, and in 2011 there were very few people in Philadelphia who knew what a trapeze was. I spent a lot of time in conversation saying, like, well, picture a bar, and then there are these 2 ropes that go, yeah, to the ceiling. And since then, we've educated the audience that our work exists, that it might be of interest, and to come to our shows. So that is something that has been built basically out of whole cloth. So I'm very excited about these conversations about reaching out to audiences that maybe aren't trained to think of theater as something that would be as fun as printing. Audiences that maybe are interested but might not know that we exist because the name isn't in the forefront. I'm really interested in working together to build resources so that people can have a shared adult, I think maybe the theater should happen in the bar. Maybe we do a lot of work in public. I'm really excited to maybe work with other people who are interested in building this kind of collective resource.
So I feel like a lot, I'm John, I feel like a lot of what we're talking about is about what you just said about educating an audience and bringing an audience, creating the demand for all of the supply that we have. And I was just in Europe for a month in Berlin and Paris seeing a bunch of work, and I was amazed because every theater I went to was packed. It was just packed with people. There was such a demand for the work. Right now in Avignon, there's going to be a strike in Paris. All the artists are potentially not going to perform, do the work to tell the French government, which is potentially going to revoke their amazing funding platform there, that you need artists. So I'm just, in terms of this question about creating demand, do we need to play hardball? What are the steps that we can take to say to our community, the community that uses us already, you need us, and this is actually a resource and an important part of your life, and you're not supporting it well enough. And how do we say to what?
Like go on strike?
I mean that would be the hardball. I mean that's what they're doing in France, but they're always doing that. Yes. But I'm just wondering about what are ways that we can say to the people that are consuming our work, this is important. This is important, and you need to support this. And it's not like it's not the same thing as like buying a movie ticket. It's more like buying a sandwich. It's food. And then how can we access these new communities that aren't consuming our work because they're not raised to? The thing that I felt like was happening in Europe is that there was a community that was raised to do that.
Yeah.
We're not. No action. Sorry.
I mean, I think one thing that's different in some European cities in terms of the way that presentations get put out to the public is there's a focus on individual artists or individual ensembles in terms of what's being presented, that's the product. One of the problems is that you know the majority of the marketing mojo in the cultural landscape in Philadelphia is caught up in nonprofits. And nonprofits, we need to do fundraising campaigns, we need to sell subscriptions, we need to do branding, you know, we need to sell the institution, you know, on a year-by-year basis. That's our imperative at some level. But I think in some ways that's ended up being a little bit penny wise, pound foolish, because what we failed to do is you know, put the artist at the front of our marketing. And at the front of what we're putting out there in the world, yeah, I mean, I think, and so we've done a bad job, at least in the performing arts, I think, of establishing the value proposition of the individual artist in our community. You know, we haven't been doing a service to all of you guys in that sense, and maybe there are proactive ways that when people are working with institutions with a lot of marketing resources, to suggest that might be a good idea, but I think there's also an ethic that needs to change. And I think it would be good for our audiences too if we did that, because people don't want to have a relationship with the corporate entity. People want to have a relationship with you guys, and we're doing a bad job of facilitating that.
Corner person standing.
Hi. I wanted to come back to what Josh said earlier about making the slice of the pie bigger, and specifically thinking about our governments that we pay for. Because I think right now we're talking about how do we survive in this economy. I think another question to ask ourselves is how do we create an economy in which more people thrive instead of just survive. It's just like 3 quick government examples of things that if they didn't spend money on that, they could spend money on us. On a local level, something that I'm sure was pressing to a lot of artists, stop arresting people for weed. That would save, that's something that city council just passed, that's something the police commissioner says he's not going to do. But if we didn't put people in jail for that, then we could spend that money for something else. On a state level, they operate here in the city, but the parking authority, they don't need 10 executives who are each making 6 figures. And so these aren't these giant mystical institutions. These are people, we elected people to make decisions, and these are decisions where they decide to make money. And then on a federal level, everybody's talking about foundations. Foundations exist because wealthy people get to keep a lot of their money and decide what to do with it, and then they get to take a very small percentage of that, less than 3%, and give some of it away to us so that we fight really hard over it. But if that money just got taxed and they didn't get to keep all of it, then it could come down here in more democratic ways. And so those things feel really big, but just recently we had the primary here in Philadelphia, and they turned out less than 10% of the electorate. And so it's like, I think as artists, people who can create new ideas, people who can bring people together, and then people who can inspire them, not only can we figure out how to live in this world, but I think we also have the potential as a group to create a world where more people thrive, because I don't want to live in a city where all of us figure out how to make a living, but then our neighbors have to move to Upper Darby because the rent went up, and the security guard who's at our show can't get a sick day. I don't want to live in that city. So I think we have to figure out how to survive. We really have to do that, but we also don't want to be like, we're the poor people that get to go to the art museum and eat small sandwiches and forget about our neighbors and everybody else who also wants to make a living and have housing, health care, and all those things as well.
Who are you?
I'm Jacob.
Hi, I'm Catherine. I just wanted to go back to something that Josh actually mentioned at the beginning, which is about making a living as an artist in Philadelphia and the impossibility, perhaps, of doing that or raising a family, etc. I was thinking a lot. I moved here 20 years ago after some rather thorough city shopping, just finding places where actually you can make a living as an artist and have somewhat of a normal life. I have 2 kids, I have a husband who's an artist, and I'm an artist, and I chose Philadelphia on purpose, and one of the things that Josh had said was that the difference between being a working artist here, you might do 5 shows in order to make a living, and in New York you just do 1, and actually it's really not true, and I want to make sure that we start, if we're talking about financial reality, then we need to start with the truth. And the vast majority of artists living in New York do not make their living by doing 1 show. Those are the Broadway artists. Actually, that's almost the only way. I lived in New York for a long time before I moved here. Really, the only way you can make a living as an artist in theater, which is my realm, in New York, is by being on Broadway. Anywhere else, even off-Broadway, even some of the big houses, you are not making your living doing just theater. So I just need to clear up that, because that's a false premise. It is possible to make your living, even a small one, in Philadelphia as an artist. And one of the things that makes this possible is the cost of living here is so much cheaper, that you can actually buy a home here, you can actually have a family, you can actually sustain yourself here. One of the things that I have found is a problem in this conversation is that the other side of the story isn't getting out, isn't being communicated, which is what art actually does. Aside from what we want, which of course we do. But the flip side of that is what we do to make a community a place that people want to live.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, there's been a real lack of getting that message out. I look at places. I was in Ambler recently at Act 2 Playhouse seeing a play, and haven't been there in 10 years since I did a play there. The city is just exploded. There are restaurants, there are bars, there are stores they actually want to go into, not just dollar stores. And they all came because of the theater. And I'm wondering if anyone has ever done a study. You look at old cities. When live arts, when the Fringe Live Arts started there, it was awful, and it was wonderful for us because we got these great, really cool, wonderful spaces that we could make art in. And the yuppies saw it and said, "Oh, I want to make a condo out of that." But it exploded, and the impact of the arts on community. Why more and more people were graduating from Temple, UArts, Penn, people not in the arts are choosing to stay in Philadelphia. One of the reasons is because there's a vibrant city culture, and that comes from the arts. So one of the things that I'm wondering about in Action Step is how to get that message more prominently out there, that actually we're not just saying, give me, give me, give me. We're saying, look what we do to to make this a vibrant community where people, young people especially, choose to live.
It's interesting because, you know, we experience Foundation's favorite changing buzzword often, right? And we're in a moment of placemaking. And like I found out today, there's an organization based in New York, Our Place, and they give out grants to organizations and civic agencies to create places. And that initiative came out of research that proves, Catherine, what you're talking about to be true. And I was having lunch with someone today who said that when they talked to the executive director of Our Place, he doesn't want to say anything except that artists are the smartest people in the room, and artists' existence in a place is what sets off this ripple effect. So, yes, we have to keep putting that message out there, but it gets confusing when it seems like on some level people do really understand that, but it doesn't transform into economic realities. I think the term that came up again in the Brooklyn Commie report was public good, which was this idea that this thing is here, it's important, it started with artists, it's making my life better, but I'm not interacting with it monetarily, or, I mean.
You're right, like it's there for public good. So hang on 1 second, because it's almost 8, and then you'll get to you, I promise. So for those of you who have to leave at 8, you can go at 8, I suppose, but we really want to keep you changed to your show. So what I tried to do, and John Frisbee, I'm sure, has done a much better job because he's been taking notes all along, is capture a little bit of the needs, a little bit of some of the literally suggested action steps. What if we did this? And then over here, some more of the ideas of like, okay, so what might we think about of areas to organize ourselves if that's what we want to do going forward? And it seems that one of those themes to me is around connecting, right? Either within the artistic community, that whole idea of mentorships or any of those other things that floated up, or beyond the arts community, right? You want to be interested in connecting past that. The idea of collaborating, a whole lot of things under that theme about the administrative burden, how do we share that, about fundraising, about space, about performances, about marketing and media, or the idea of advocating. Right? Trying to build audience demand, trying to think about increasing our presence in education, trying to get more people talking about and understanding the value of art and artists, and of course everyone's favorite, money, right? So, you were jumping out of your bones there, David.
Telling that story is, I think, a really clear action. Everyone knows it's true, and you know, collecting the data for how the economic activity of the arts has been huge for Philadelphia in the last 15 years. William Penn, about 15 years ago, decided to give small grants to artists. And they did that for 15 years, and it was huge, not just for the arts, but it made Philadelphia a destination in huge areas where millions and millions of dollars to lots of people developed because of it. And then William Penn has just changed, and they've been like, there's not a demand for the arts. And they're fundamentally misunderstanding the relationship, the economic relationship of what happens at the grassroots in the arts to the city. So I just want to say that telling that story and collecting data around that so that we can tell that story, it's very real. Like the funding going out of the grassroots arts community seriously affects the economic life of the city in all kinds of ways, and policymakers really care about it.
So can I say that the Old City Association actually did do this research and created a beautiful infographic on it that goes into like how much arts money has come in and how much the community has, like it's like beautifully laid out, and it goes into all of the economic values that the arts have added. So if you're interested, I would.
Thank you, Sally. Okay, I tried to say from the beginning, if you want to find out what we're going to do next, and you haven't given your email through Eventbrite, you can go to phillyartistsummit.org, and there's a tab that says Stay in Touch, and I'm going to make a Google group, and we're going to figure out what to do next. Perhaps do this again, if nothing else, and we'll let you know. So if you want to know, just give us your email address. Wait, there's also a sign-up sheet outside by the door. So if you're leaving, thank you. I just wanted to say that to me is an obvious action step. Specific to Philadelphia, perhaps us as an artist community need to conduct the rigorous research of collecting what research exists that's actually about us you know, there's research on different levels from different years and different times, but what's the research that has happened about this community that is still relevant, and how much exists already and how much doesn't, and who could do it?
What does it all tell us together? Yeah.
And what, you know, what are the terms that needs to be in to make the change of the biggest funders that are happy to hear it? Terry?
I don't know how many of you saw this article in the Ninth Arts, but an article is called "Is a Better Funding Model for the Cultural Sector on the Horizon?" And basically it's an arts, like a PCA or somebody who has done a study in their community, knowing how valuable, how much money the arts generate. And they have taken it upon themselves, the government, the foundations, the private sector, to figure out how to give more money to the arts. And that's what needs to happen. The people who have the power, and maybe we have to force them to do that, to look at it and get some more money into the arts before, I mean, if it's all going to peter away, everybody starts going out of the arts, what happens then? You know, so there has to be ways that we can put, you know, they want to, I think some of the, I mean, they have admitted so many times just how valuable the arts are, how much money it generates in the economy, what it does for the neighborhoods. They know these things. There's been study after study after study.
Yeah.
Do something about it, and maybe we have to be the ones who kind of.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you for that reminder. It's true. You do know all this.
Just to give some perspective on how big the pie is and how big it could be, and to piggyback off of the question of our budgetary priorities and the idea of placemaking, $165 million or so would be enough to fund our whole school system, and that's the price of one fighter jet that we are ordering 22,000 of. Like, those numbers blow my mind, because we're squabbling over crumbs in terms of what society we're trying to build.
Yeah.
And there's a team of allies. There's a whole set of people who are not here, who 85% could be. A couple years ago, I was invited to this meeting, Bread and Roses, well no, first of all, the Cultural Alliance had this meeting, Cultural Engagement Task Force, let's vision what we want for Philadelphia over the next decade, cultural groups, arts, dance, theater, blah, blah, blah. But a lot of exercises of visioning what we wanted. And like 6 weeks before, 6 weeks after, I went to the exact same meeting of all the groups funded by Bread and Roses Community Fund, all these like social justice activist groups. And they had the exact same meeting. They prioritized the exact same things. We all want to build the exact same city. We might disagree over little bits, and because we're all underfunded, under-resourced, passion-driven, scrabbling folks, we have this, it's easy to fall into that like scarcity mentality of like, oh, that little bit of money for the library, this is going to come from my dance theater budget. I want it all to come from the defense budget. The offense budget. I'm just saying, there's a whole lot of people out there who have the same priorities as we do in a lot of senses, and they need our help, and we need theirs, and that's it. Like, connect with them.
So you guys, it's really past 8. And we can keep going. I think what I learned today is that this is on this level, this is a hard thing to get started. Like we kind of it just took some time to get going, and then I knew we were going to get going, and we weren't going to be able to stop. And we had 2 hours this evening. So I think we've collected some things, and we also have to kind of reorient ourselves with what are we doing again? But the idea is that we wanted to get started, and we wanted to include you and let you know that, I mean, at least for the time being, I'm available to be at the center to at least make a Google group. We haven't specifically talked about actions and what we can do. So we haven't gotten there so much today. But Julie was great and captured these. So, what do we say?
So the only thing I would say to you on the way out is A, we're going to stick around for a little bit. So stick around if you want to stick around and talk to any of us. And B, if you are, if you're one of the people jumping out of your skin with your hand raised, that means you should stay involved in this, right? So speak up, stay involved, be a part of whatever happens next. Like I said at the beginning, we have no idea what that will be yet, but we would welcome your participation in it.
Also, I just want to say that I feel very lucky to be part of this small group, but
I'm gonna say they, are very effective at synthesizing information and figuring out how best to organize it. And for me, one of the things that I wanted to, and I think we all wanted this to be a great, interesting conversation that then could go somewhere. So we will do our utmost to figure out where those steps could be and engage as many of you as humanly possible in those next steps so that this conversation doesn't have to stop tonight or here in this room, but we'll sort of continue, and maybe we'll come up with some action steps. Maybe the next thing will be about what the action steps should be, we will see. But I just wanted to kind of say, we will take all of this and we will make something with it, and we will share it with you, and we will be a part of it. So.
And Amy, John, anything?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for being here. It's so nice to have such a range of voices in the room, and I just want to reiterate, this isn't like hosted by anybody, this isn't a Piggiron thing or a Headlong thing, or a Drexel thing. It's really a grassroots effort that the 5 of us decided to do on our own steam, and so just a reminder, there's no there, like it is us. We are it. So let's keep the conversation going, and let's be warm and generous with each other, be collective with each other when we can, and just try to get the messages out about what needs to happen to make the city better.
One of our questions is, you know, are we the faces of this movement? Who are the faces? It doesn't necessarily need to be us. Again, because like a lot of people in terms, like I want to live in Philadelphia where the artists are thriving, and I kind of don't care who figures it out, but like let's figure it out. I think it needs everybody. So we're gonna continue to think about it and how out and be as involved as you want to be. You can find this beginning process here. Share any resources with us that we don't know. You know, the further readings list is not nearly complete. It was just what we threw together in 2 weeks. But let's consider this some momentum having been captured in some way. John, anything you want to say?
Yeah, I mean, I know that we've been kind of coy about not pre-cooking the outcomes, but like I think we can all agree that the idea is that it would be a good thing if we were an organized and empowered community together. And so we're going to sort of muddle through how to do that together, and I think this room, you know, has a lot of potential. I mean, speaking to some of the work that Bread and Roses does, you know, this is community organizing, and I'm really excited to see what happens next.